Okay, next, the trachea. And the trachea is your windpipe. But of course, I won't accept that as an answer in my class. This is an anatomy class, so we don't call the windpipe like that anymore. So where is your trachea? As you can see in here, it just continues this is the beginning of the trachea, and it just continues the larynx. So the larynx is up here. This is the cricoid, the thyroid, and connected to the hyoid bone. And inferior to that, we will find the first tracheal ring. So this tube, which is made out of cartilage, we'll describe a little of that in a while. This tube descends into your mediastinum. And at this level, at the end of the trachea, there is an internal ridge that we call the carina. And it divides into its two terminal branches, which are the two primary bronchi. So this, we cannot see the carina, but it's inside in this area. It's only a ridge. It is Carina, by the way, no Carolina, no Claudia. I have seen a lot of things in my teaching years. So these are the two, the right and the left primary bronchus. Now, in this picture, let's evaluate, or let's get oriented on the location of the trachea and the relationship with the rest of the organs that we have described throughout the semester. So in the mediastinum, the trachea, which is this tube, is anterior, or is in the front of the esophagus. This is your esophagus, where we have food passing by, part of the digestive system, and this is your trachea, air passing through. So the esophagus, follow the esophagus, this muscular tube, which consists of skeletal muscle on the top, smooth muscle tissue on the bottom. See how it passes. This is your diaphragm muscle. So see how it passes through the diaphragm by the foramen, or the hiatus for the diaphragm, for the esophagus, and then it dilates and forms your stomach. Okay. Also, please see that the trachea is located on the right and posterior to the aortic arch. And then you can see here how the thoracic aorta descends into the thoracic cavity, passing behind the esophagus and through the diaphragm, through the opening or the foramen for the aorta. And lastly, in here, we can see the inferior vena cava, how it ascends, right? Opposite direction as the aorta. It ascends from the abdominal cavity into the thoracic cavity, passing through the foramen for the inferior vena cava in the diaphragm muscle. So this is like putting everything together, everything that we have known or learned in this area, in this course. Now, that trachea is not just attached or is, actually, let me rephrase this. The trachea is separated by the esophagus by a muscle in here that we call the trachealis. So it's forming the posterior wall of the trachea. So when food is passing by the posterior aspect or through the diaphragm, it since it's flexible, it can accommodate the passage of food into this through the esophagus. Okay, so again, this is a sagittal view. Here we can see the sagittal section of all the vertebrae. Right in front of that, see, this is the esophagus, that posterior, and in front of that, this is the trachea that you can feel here in the anterior aspect of your neck. Now, this muscle is the trachealis muscle, the one that I was describing in the other slide. So this trachealis muscle consists of smooth muscle tissue, and it forms the posterior aspect of the trachea and kind of separates the trachea from the posterior esophagus. This trachealis muscle is the one that contracts to increase the pressure here on the trachea when we're coughing out any dust particle or any debris. Now, the trachea consists, it's a rigid, well, one more picture before that. So you can see the trachea in here. At this level, we will have the trachealis, and here is the esophagus. Now, the trachea, as you can see, consists of at least 15, 16, 20 of these cartilage rings. But this cartilage has the shape of a C. So we have a lateral side, we have an anterior side, and another lateral side. Posteriorly, they are opened, and the posterior aspect of the trachea consists then of the trachealis muscle and not cartilage. So this gives the fact that the trachea consists of cartilage gives this some rigidity. So it makes this tube kind of rigid, but at the same time flexible, because it's not only one tube of cartilage, but each ring is separated, as you can see, by these membranes, pieces of connective tissue in there that gives flexibility to this tube, so you can bend it. It's flexible. Now let's see. In this picture, we can see again the C-shaped cartilage. Okay, let's understand this. This is a transverse section of the trachea, okay, or through the neck actually. So we can see anteriorly the trachea and posteriorly the esophagus, okay? So this is the trachealis muscle. It's not part of the esophagus. See, this is the wall of the esophagus. It's the posterior aspect of the trachea. So that's the trachealis muscle. Right here we can see in the lumen, which is the inner space of the tube, it contains air. The lumen is lined by an epithelium. So what kind of epithelium do you think? It's the same pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. Here is a cool picture where you can see the cilia. And remember, cilia, they are not like that, they just move in one direction, and it's a synchronized movement. So to sweep all of the dust particles or any foreign particle that got to the trachea, it sweeps in one direction. Which one? Inferior or distal to the respiratory tract, or proximal toward the larynx and the pharynx? Where do you think? Exactly, it sweeps up, okay? So you can cough that up, or yeah, when you can cough it up and expel that foreign particle. Now, underneath that epithelium, we will find several glands, and some of these glands produce that mucus and serous fluid that lines this epithelium that traps pathogens as well. And right in here, we can see the C shape, or almost like a horseshoe shape, right? Cartilage ring. So it's a C-shaped again. This is the anterior aspect. This is the posterior aspect. So you can see there is opened posteriorly. We just have the two lateral sides and the anterior aspect of the cartilage, of the cartilage ring. And right then you have the subcutaneous tissue and the skin. So you can actually feel all the rings of the trachea. It kind of bothers a little bit, but you can feel it in there. So now, remember, which is in the next video, I'm going to introduce to you all the branches. You know that we said that this trachea divides into the right and left primary bronchus, and let's see the rest of the branches of these primary bronchus on the next video. See you.